Welcome to my new channel. My YouTube spirit animal, Matthew Gielen, suggested that the fastest way for me to get to my 10 million subscribers on my main channel is to split up the content. So it's not 3 videos a day on one channel, but multiple videos a day spread off across, well, now I have 7 different channels. So this is the first video on this new channel. If you want to know why I did this, continue watching, because Matt Gielen is going to dive in and tell me why I made a big mistake.
I'm dreaming, oh, I believe in this dream I've been dreaming, oh, I'm dreaming, oh, I believe in this dream I've been dreaming, oh.
This is it. I'm here. I'm excited. Let's do it. Matt Gielen, the YouTube analytics maestro extravaganza. I'm ready.
Thank you. And thank you for the enthusiasm on our. So let's talk about your channel. So your channel posts 3 videos a day, and those videos all have kind of different purposes. So why don't you tell me about that?
So the main theme of my channel is believe. That's the umbrella that I've tried to create everything under. It's a mix of 3 types of series. One where I'm just DJing other people's content, the best of Gary Vee or Tony Robbins, and made deals with those guys. 2 is half me and half somebody else. And then 3 is all me. I try to keep it under that umbrella of believe, but the ones that is only celebrity focused seem to do better. The ones that are only me, I'm working on building my brand up. And so that's the, I guess, question that I deal with is how much do I do of me versus other people? Because I want to build my brand, but I also want to grow the channel.
Got you. So what we see from a general YouTube perspective is that having multiple different series on the same channel doesn't allow any of them to really flourish, because you're going to get different audiences for different series. Basically, there's going to be a lot of people there for you. There's going to be a lot of people there for some of the different formats, right? And there's going to be different people there for kind of the celebrities and other kind of thought leaders in the space. And so what ends up happening is each upload is not really able to kind of hit your full audience. And so most uploads don't kind of reach their full potential or get shared out broadly on YouTube. And we can take a look at the analytics to see what that is. But kind of the biggest recommendation we can make is to kind of split out the content to different channels, kind of serving each one of those interest groups. You know, from a personal branding perspective and building up your own brand, what we would recommend is making the main channel just you and videos that just feature you. Now, if part of that is talking about other people or talking about other people's concepts and theories, that's absolutely fine. But the main kind of value proposition from a personality or talent perspective would be you, and spinning out other channels for some of the other series that feature you less, like the kind of the top 10 videos where you're like DJing or it's just other people. We would recommend putting those on a different channel in order to make your channel all about you and the audience there for you. I did a live stream with Tim Schmoyer the other day, and I referred to it as having one value proposition for your channel, right? As in the same way that every video has one value proposition or should have one value proposition to the audience. He referred to it as having kind of like a unifying belief system or principle for the channel, basically. And I thought that was really, really good, because what that can do is it can free you up to do a lot of different types of formats, not having to be just stuck in one particular format. Because if the format is bigger than the personality or the belief system, that can kind of get you into that position of like eventually getting burnt out, where you're just doing the same video over and over and over again. But that said, we still kind of recommend dividing up the channels based on like audience, what the audience is there for, and what the kind of the key value proposition is to the audience. And what we're going to do now is dive into analytics and show you how that's playing out on your channel. So right here we have the last 365 days. I'm going to click on views, right? And your audience has been very, very consistent, right? Throughout the last 365 days. On average, you're probably doing somewhere between, 250 and 275 on average throughout the last 365 days, right? If we go back.
That dip at October, November, I went all in on premieres, all in, and destroyed my channel. So let's stop the premieres, and it came back. So
Yeah.
The failed experiment.
The premieres we've seen have very kind of mixed results. It seems to work best when something is eventized, right? And you're going to drive a lot of people to that video early on, right? And it's a big thing as opposed to doing it on just a very regular, consistent basis. You happen to do that right when there was a massive algorithm shift. I don't know how much we can necessarily blame premieres. I'm sure it had somewhat of an effect on it because I think it messes with the alert system a little bit and you just get less kind of people engaging with the video. But if we look at suggested videos,
well,
right?
Well, what I
videos.
also did, Matt, is so I do 3 videos a day. My one that I thought would do the best, I did a premiere. And then the other 2, I said, don't send the subscribers.
That is not a good thing to do.
Yeah.
That is
to really focus on the
very...
premieres only. Yeah. And then I was hoping to get enough from the suggested and the browse. But yeah, it didn't. It was a massive failed experiment.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, don't do that. We're gonna switch over to views. So here's the channel going back last year, right? It's very consistent, right? Beginning of summer, you really began to grow, right? And then right around mid-September, there was actually a shift in the algorithm, right? And that shift really harmed high frequency upload channels, right? I put out a video right around VidCon where I showed that high volume channels that were uploading more than 3 times a week, let alone a day, were getting far, far less viewership kind of across the board, right? We looked at the top 500 channels on Social Blade in terms of viewership in a given 30-day period. What we saw was channels that uploaded more than 3 videos a week, their viewership was cratering. T-Series lost 700 million monthly views from August to November. WWE lost something like 1 billion views in that same time period. Both of these channels are high volume channels. There's a ton more examples of it, but essentially what our belief is that there's one of 2 things that happened. Either there was a greater weighting put on click-through rate, or there was a greater preference given to newer content in suggested. And we know that that's only going to happen if a video has a higher click-through rate. If your video is new, it'll be put into suggested if it has a high click-through rate. So they're both related to click-through rate, but higher frequency channels like yours have a tendency to have lower click-through rates, right? And the reason why is twofold. One, when you're higher frequency, chances are you're uploading on a far larger number of topics than smaller channels, right? And you have far more value propositions for your channel as a whole than smaller channels, right? For example, Cocomelon. Cocomelon uploads 2 videos a week, right? And the value proposition of every video is nursery rhymes, right? It's hitting the same exact audience, right? It has the same characters in every video and they have great thumbnails. So chances are they have very high click-through rates. Higher frequency channels, let's take T-Series, for example, right? They're gonna be uploading videos from a whole bunch of different like music artists and TV shows and films, and you're never just going to hit a large percentage of your audience, but that video is still going to be put in front of a large number of them. And so generally speaking, they tend to have much lower click-through rates. And the same thing is true for your channel, right? There's lots and lots of people that are there that just want to see your opinion on things. There's lots of people there that just want to see the top 10s from, you know, different like celebrities or thought leaders in the space and that sort of thing. And then there are going to be people there that are just there for one particular series. And so no matter what you put up, you're going to have a lower click-through rate than that video might otherwise have if it was put in front of just an audience that was there for that particular type of video or that particular creator. And so that suggested video algorithm shift happened right here, right? Mid to early September. And we've seen this on a whole bunch of different channels, right? And so all of a sudden your content was getting less and less viewership from suggested, bringing down your viewership as a whole in the channel. Is this right about when you began doing premieres?
Yeah, probably. What is that, November? Yeah, October, November. Yeah.
So those videos, right, exacerbated the problem.
Yeah.
Right? So the algorithm was screwing with you, right? And then the premieres happened, right? Now jump back up a little bit, right? And you've kind of been stuck here in suggested since then. Now we've seen other channels kind of rebound in suggested, and your channel's rebounded a little bit, but it hasn't rebounded back to where it was here, right? And so while this was really screwed with people, right, and then you kind of shot yourself in the foot a little bit here, right? And now you bounce back a little bit. The pendulum hasn't swung back all the way, right? So in typical YouTube fashion, right, they made this drastic sweeping change, right? And then they kind of slowly moved it back right around December 15th, right? So here is December 15th for you, right? And it was kind of and then by, January bounce back up. And some of this could be the result of seasonality. Some of it could be the result of fewer ads on the platform. But basically the algorithm we've seen by and large has swung back somewhat, but not fully, right? It's still very, very heavily dependent on click-through rate. And if we look at your click-through rate, we see that it's about 4.1%, which is low, right? Your YouTube search click-through rate is actually much higher, right? Which does speak to a lot of good things from an optimization standpoint or a metadata standpoint. But what it also says is that your videos should be getting above a 6.5% click-through rate, because when people search for a specific term and one of your videos is surfaced, what ends up happening is they click on it. They click on it at a higher rate, right? But in suggested and browse, right, you're hitting too many different audiences. So it's driving down that click-through rate and it's preventing those videos from doing extremely well. If we look at click-through rate, we see that for suggested, it actually used to be a little bit higher, right? And it kind of dropped some in here, but by the time the switch happened, it kind of went up a little bit. Then you've got the kind of the wonkiness through here, right? And it got up to like 5% in here. But now you're starting to climb back up again, which is good, but it's still too low. And it's still too low because you're just hitting too many different audiences. For example, if someone's watching one of your top 10 videos and in the sidebar, YouTube says, this person likes watching Evan's videos, let's serve them some more. They don't necessarily understand that that person just wants to watch one of your particular series. And so they might serve them any video from your library of content that you've uploaded with a preference to newer content. And that person is less likely to click on that because they might not be there for that particular series. And then seeing how browse is even lower, right? That's a bit troubling. Now, some of that is that it's been out here or is including data from out here when it was like real low. And then as you got into kind of this downturn, right? I don't know how the premieres function was messing with this, but it kind of had a lot of like pretty big ups and downs, going anywhere from like 3.7 down to, what is it here? It's 2.5. That's a pretty big swing percentage-wise, right? You're talking about a 33% swing in click-through rate, even though it's only like a 1 point whatever percentage point difference. That said, kind of going into this new year, it's definitely gotten better, right? And Suggest is getting better. That said, your viewership isn't necessarily pacing with it. Now, Browse is going up, but Suggested is staying flat. So it's great that Browse is going up. That speaks to kind of more consistent programming, but Suggested isn't from a viewership perspective. And so where you want to be is in here, right? Where you're doing roughly 2x the number in Suggested that you're doing in Browse. Where you really don't want to be is when Browse is doing more than Suggested. Basically, if Browse is doing more than Suggested, what YouTube is telling you is that they want to take people away from your channel and put them on other channels, right? The majority of your suggested video views are going to come from your own content.
Yep.
Not other people's content. So if we go and look at where suggested video viewership is coming from for your channel, a lot of it is yours. So the 5 lessons in life people learn too late, I believe that's one of yours.
Yep.
9 ways to make people respect you immediately.
Yep.
This one, I believe, is like not yours.
No, that's not mine.
Life lessons, is that yours?
No.
And Jack Ma?
I don't think that one is. The next Jack Ma one is.
All right. So these are your videos that are sending traffic to your content, right? Here's where we were right around the time of the algorithm shift, right? And then these videos began to trail off, right? The 5 life lessons had, a major fall off November 4th. Right now, this could be in part due to premieres, or it could be in part due to something else. Now, they've rebounded a little bit, right? I believe it starts right around December 14th, right? So they kind of came here and they were doing and then December 14th, 15th, boom, right? They take off and they got some of that viewership, which is where you're seeing that increase in suggested video viewership. Now they've leveled off a little bit back to where they were in here. But it's still driving viewership. Let's take a look at other people's channels. Going into September, they were sending, a pretty fair amount. It was actually the most it ever done. And then it began to trail off a little bit right around the time that you started doing premieres, right? And then it basically fell to nothing. Now, some of this could have been that these videos weren't getting much viewership. It's not necessarily that your videos stopped being served next to them. It may just be that these videos stopped being served in terms of like generating viewership. Now, with the correction, right around mid-December, they began kind of sending viewership again, but life lessons from 100-year-olds has never kind of rebounded to where it was, right? And this is a pretty insignificant amount of viewership. We're talking about 1,000 views a day. Now, this is just the top 3, right? But what that essentially shows is that YouTube is just not using your content to send viewership to your channel. And I think the main reason is a lower than average kind of click-through rate, which is being primarily generated by a high volume of uploads, right? So let's look at the last 28 days, right? So your overall impression click-through rate is 4.3%. Generally, that's probably a little bit lower than average, right? That's your channel average as a whole, right? Remember when we saw just a second ago, right? I'll go back to it. The click-through rates from these videos, right? We got 6.6, 6.7, 6, 7, 6, 7, 7, 6, 5, 10, 9.3, 10.8, right? Those videos are bringing up your click-through rate pretty significantly. Your newer videos are bringing down your click-through rate pretty significantly, right? So let's just look at a randomly kind of selected video. This one actually performed pretty well for your channel in terms of average. But the impression click-through rate on day 1 is 2.1%, right? That's pretty terrible for your audience, right? That's on the way, way lower end. And it has nothing to do with like your thumbnail, right? Your thumbnail is pretty good. Your title is excellent, right? What it is you just have too segmented of an audience on your channel. Now, it's gone up, right? Which probably means that this video is going to gain a fair amount of viewership over time. But you're just building this massive, massive library in the hopes that YouTube will serve library content as opposed to newer content in suggested and browse, right? Because at any time they can say, well, we're seeing more and more that people just want newer content that is highly relevant in the moment. And so we're just going to serve more new content, which is, I think, a big part of what we saw kind of in September, right? Where the high frequency channels that were getting most of their viewership from their library, saw a massive decrease in viewership, right? Does that all kind of jive with what you see going on your channel?
What you're saying makes sense. I think who knows? So now making decisions from that, the strength of the library is definitely one of my biggest assets, having 5,000 or 6,000 videos on there. I guess hard to predict where YouTube's going to go next.
Yeah, it is. Generally speaking, though, a video becomes a library video at 7 days old, basically, right? Okay. You get the new tag for those first 7 days, and YouTube has repeatedly stated, both in white papers that engineers have put out and on Creator Insider and in other places, that they see that people prefer fresh content, not at the expense of relevancy to them, but that's what they prefer. So the library content will always be there, right? It will always have the potential to generate viewership, but every new video you put up becomes library content very quickly. And if a video gets the majority of its impressions in the first 48 hours, which the vast majority of videos do, right? So this is your impressions. First day, 100,000 impressions. Second day, 150,000 impressions. Third day, you're at 165,000 total impressions. Now you're down to 2,000. So to get to the same volume of impressions that you got in the first 72 hours, right? Assuming it doesn't go up in terms of impressions, right? You're looking at around 80 days from now, just getting to even on this, right? So like if your click-through rate on day 1, 2, and 3 is hovering around 2%, right? And as you get out here, it's going to bounce back and forth between like 3 and 4, right? You're talking about hundreds of thousands of impressions that video has to get to even out on a click-through rate perspective. And even if it does, right, you're talking about kind of like a ceiling as of now of 4.4%. That's the high point here for this particular video, I'm saying. And this is probably generally true from like what I've seen just kind of poking around on the channel of that happening. And the reason why is that YouTube is going to serve this video to your audience more than any other audience, right? These are people watching your videos, people that watch your videos historically, right? And the same exact thing is going to happen in the library as it does for new content, where this video might be served to someone that just wants to watch videos of you. So what ends up happening is you never kind of get out of this cycle of low click-through rate, which means less and less of your library is going to be served broadly across YouTube, where you can mitigate a lot of this click-through rate by having highly singularly focused audiences. I know it's tough. It's really, really tough to kind of pull a trigger on that. What we generally recommend is to do it kind of in baby steps, right? Where if there's a particular series that just really underperforms on your channel, putting that on a separate channel can give that video or that series a life of its own, an audience of its own, because it might just be that type of video or series underperforms with your current audience, but there might be a very big audience out there for it generally on YouTube. And by giving its own space to breathe, YouTube can find who those people are much more clearly, right? Because YouTube is taking every single data point in for every single impression, every single view, right? And determining who's watching that video, who's going to be interested in it, what else do they watch, so that they can go out and serve that video to more people like them that have similar watch histories. And so an underperforming video, YouTube never really gets a chance to do that. Or an underperforming series, YouTube never really gets a chance to do that because the click-through rate is too low on that video with your audience for YouTube to say, wow, we should expand the audience for this particular video, right? Because they see far more people saying, no, I don't want to click on that video. So that's a general recommendation. Let's put that aside for a second and just kind of talk about the channel and the programming strategy kind of as is. Generally speaking, you have a really great average view duration. The average view duration, I don't believe, has changed too much over the last year or so, although there was one jump, right? Yeah. So right in here, there was a big jump, right? You were averaging, 7 to 8, right? And then you jumped. And you've actually been trending upward since then. Is there a particular reason for that? Like, is there anything that stands out to you as to why this is?
The thing that comes to mind is what I emailed you about before, which is YouTube seems to be recommending my longer content more. So we did a 3-hour Les Brown mix and a 4-hour Wayne Dyer mix from years ago. And those are, if you look at our views or watch time, like those right now are 1 and 2, and those are crazy long videos that are, best of Les Brown and then 4 hours of Wayne Dyer. Those 2 videos are generating big watch time, and they're old.
Gotcha. So
that's what seems to come to mind.
Yeah, an average view duration of an hour and an hour and 12 minutes is not common. You don't see that every day.
Right.
So, okay. That definitely makes sense. Another factor within that can be seen in the viewership. So like if we just look at the views on these videos, right, and your average view duration went up right when viewership began going down. Now, yes, those longer videos are contributing more, but from a viewership perspective, right, the volume of views that they're getting is not nearly as high as other videos on the channel, right? Like you got a 2-minute 47 here that is, accounting for 3% of your total viewership, whereas, the longer videos are accounting for, 0.6-ish% of your total viewership. Now, yeah, they're minutes and they weigh out in terms of like the length of the average view duration. But essentially what's happening is when your viewership is going up from like kind of like a general plateau, like this is a general plateau pretty much all the way through here until early summer, right? Maybe even like a slight decline, right?
Yep.
What happens here is YouTube begins expanding your audience. As your viewership goes up, YouTube is hitting less and less of your core audience in the same way that like if you have a video, let's say your average video does 10,000 views in the first 72 hours. If you have a video that does 15, 20, 25,000 views in those first 72 hours, essentially YouTube is expanding your audience, right? And they're reaching less and less of your core audience, more and more of people who maybe don't watch every single video, maybe haven't watched a video in a couple weeks. And in certain cases, like if the video does really, really well, it's reaching people who have never watched your content before. So that's what's happening here. And then as your viewership goes down, you're getting more and more of a core audience, right? Where YouTube is just serving your videos to the people that like click on every video or, click on videos at a high rate and that sort of thing. And so what we tend to see is average view duration increase as viewership decreases, and kind of vice versa. Same thing with click-through rate, actually, for the same exact reason. So having an average view duration as high as you do is certainly not a bad thing, in my view. I think there's a wider range of like good average view durations currently on YouTube than what we found in 2017, where the sweet spot was really between 6 and 8 minutes of average view duration. I think you can do very well, and I think it's with average view durations both above and below that, because they're getting better and better and better at programming to the individual. The problem becomes when that individual is presented different types of content from a channel and doesn't click on it at the same rate, basically, right? So, because YouTube can't tell different series from the same channel. They just look at it as, widget. But having an average view duration that's increasing, especially if some of this increase is just coming from those super long videos, is perfectly good. In terms of increasing your click-through rate with kind of the current programming that you're doing now, I think your thumbnails and I think your titles are great. What that means is, or what it kind of comes down to increasing that click-through rate, is to alter your programming some. We took a look at your data and looked at a number of or a few different assets, right? First up is views versus length. So this is your top 500 videos in the month of January and what their average views were by their length down here, right? So this graph doesn't tell us too much, other than there's like kind of a sweet spot that's between 10 minutes and 30 minutes, right? You're like, that doesn't tell you much because almost every one of your videos is between 10 minutes and 30 minutes, right?
Right.
So the next thing we do is we round it, right? We round it to the nearest minute, which means like if you make a 10.5 or 9.5 to 10.5 minute video, right? That's going to be 10 minutes, right? And so here we see views versus length rounded. And again, the data is not super clean or super clear. And the red line is the count of videos that we looked at. So really, like, you kind of want to be like, okay, all of this data over here can be more or less ignored because it's a small sample size, right? This is really our best sample size. But again, there's not like a clear pattern that jumps out. Like, we start zeroing in, I think, a little bit on here, right? Like, this can be explained by an outlier, right? This 14-minute average right here, like just a couple of outliers in a sample size of, we'll call that 19 or 20, right, can affect that. But like here, we start to see a bit of a trend of increasing viewership kind of across minutes in 5-minute increments. So this here is 0 to 5 minutes. This is 5 to 10 minutes. This is 10 to 15 minutes, 15 to 20, 20 to 25, and so on and so forth. Again, we probably want to cut it off right around here because we're dealing with smaller sample sizes. But really, this is where things begin to jump out, right? Now, 15 to 20 minutes, there tends to be, or there, for your channel, is a bit of a drop. But what we see is a pretty consistent upward trend here, right? Where when you start getting into videos that are right between 20 and 30 minutes, that seems to be the sweet spot for your audience. So one of the things we'd recommend just from a length perspective is making sure that every video kind of fell into this 20 to 30 minute length category. Now you might be saying, well, what does that really have to do with click-through rate? Well, there's a lot of factors that go into click-through rate, but one of the factors that goes into it is that there are certain people that will just not click on a super long video. And then there's certain people that just won't click on a super short video, right? Like, there's going to be people that are like, I'm going to have to choose a new video in 1 minute. I'm not going to click on this for whatever reason. From a combination audience perspective and algorithmic perspective, your sweet spot is really in videos that are between 20 and 35 minutes in length. And chances are that if you put up a lot more content that's between 25 and 30, you're going to see this viewership number increase on average. Cool. The next part of programming is when we look at what is in the title or not in the title. So from a programming perspective, anytime you put top 10 in the title, it could be harming your click-through rate. And we looked at the top 500 videos again in the month of January, and when a video did not contain top 10, on average, it generated about 5,000 or 50% more views. I think we corresponded about this a little bit. You noticed it the same way in A/B testing. And now we're doing something a little bit different.
Yeah, we took top 10 out of all our titles, and we lead with a powerful opinion. So what this video is about, more than just this person's top 10 rules, after a lot of split testing. But it's great to see that your data confirms it too. It's awesome.
Yeah. One of the things you can do is you had about 250 videos in your top 500 that still contained top 10. Going through your library and updating those titles with what you're doing now could increase the viewership on those videos by conforming to what you're doing now.
It's on we're doing it. We're doing our thumbnails first. I have a guy doing our thumbnails first and then doing titles next. We've got lots of videos, but I've been a little hesitant to touch. We're doing 2 of my top 25 videos right now. Just hesitant to touch ones that are working and mess with anything. But we're doing 2 of the top 25 just to see how it goes, and then after that we'll scale it out. But we're already starting to work through the archive. It's just a process.
Yeah, man. That can take a very long time. So we also took a look at another term that was jumping out on some of your top videos, the term mentor. And when a video contained mentor in the title, on average, it did about 3,000 more views than ones that did not. Now, you're talking about a sample size of about 50 here compared to like 450, but that's a pretty good sample size and could point to more programming ideas for you in the future. Now, we're going to send over the Excel spreadsheet that we work off of when we do this. And you can look at any term you want to look at basically just by copying and pasting the equation that's already in the sheet, right? Changing what you want it to look for, which will allow a ton of kind of programming ideas to percolate. So when we're working with a client, we'll go through and do this, and we'll do it for a whole bunch of different terms that relate to their programming. It can take a really long time, but it's arguably the most valuable thing you can do. For example, one of the things we'll do for a channel like yours is we'll go through and pick some of the reoccurring characters from your channel. Like if it was a movie and TV channel, we would do like, okay, Iron Man, Game of Thrones, Avengers, right? And we want to look at those different topics, right? And what that's going to do is it's going to show us which ones our audience are generally most interested in, and the audience that's kind of flowing through our channel currently, what do they want to see more of, right? Because if you've clicked on an Avengers video in the last month and you've watched it, right, it's one of our top performing videos, chances are that it's going to continue into the next month. And if we put up more Avengers content, it's going to turn more of those viewers that are coming through that video into subscribers if they happen to come by our channel, right, and see, oh, there's more Avengers content here. Or if it gets suggested to them either in an end screen or in suggested videos or in a playlist, and they see that, they're going to become more likely to subscribe. So you mentioned early on, how do I make stuff that generates more subscribers per view or per video that we put out? This is one of the ways you can do that, right? And you can even look at it in from a conversion standpoint, right? Where if you say, okay, we're categorizing these by series, and we know we have the subscriber numbers in that spreadsheet per video, right? You can come up with a very simple, formula for converting average view duration just based on that categorization. And you're going to know your content far better than us. And so typically what we'll do is we'll go and say, okay, this is the format of the video. This is the value proposition of the video. And this is the value proposition of the thumbnail. And by categorizing that, those trends are going to pop out very easily. And you're going to say, okay, these are the things I want to double down on from a programming perspective.
Okay. Yeah, that's great.
Cool. So, I mean, that's the kind of the big stuff from the channel. If we had days and days and days and weeks and weeks and weeks to go through your data, we'd probably have a bit more. But I think it's always better to talk through the ideas behind it so that you can do this now, but you can also do it 6 months from now. You can do it a year from now from your channel. You don't need us necessarily to go through and do that data mining for you. And you're also much closer to the content, which means like you can see a title and go, okay, I know the title says this, but this is really what that video was about or something like that. Or this is really the format of the video, and you can put it in a language that's better for you, that you can do this, very easily on an ongoing basis, which is going to improve your programming, which is going to improve your click-through rate, which is going to improve your performance, and so on in that kind of virtuous cycle.
So if you're looking at, if you consider high frequency channels at three per week, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
It's high frequency. What would the recommendation be from you to me for frequency on my channel?
Probably best bet would be an upload a day.
Okay.
I don't think it's necessarily a frequency thing. Like, I don't think there's necessarily something in the algorithm that they wrote into the code. And I think Todd in a Creator Insider video said that, well, there's no line in the code that talks about frequency of post, which I'm inclined to believe, because I think there's simpler explanations of what we already know to be true about how YouTube programs its site that give an easier explanation, where it's actually not a frequency of post thing, it's a click-through rate thing. And I think if you drop down to one video a day that is either the same series or has a very similar value proposition, whether that's from a format or talent perspective, or just, these series are very similar to each other perspective, you're going to increase your click-through rate out of the gate. In no small part because you'll be reducing the amount of videos you put up by 66% during the week and 100% like on weekends if you drop down to just videos Monday through Friday.
Would my Premiere strategy that sucked give me some data on that? Because what I did was basically say only the premieres. I picked one video. It was basically one a day got Premiere, and the other one did not even notify my subscribers. So if I looked at those videos that I premiered and looked at those click-through rates, would that give me an indication?
Potentially. I don't know if the Premieres function accurately shows click-through rate based on browse, but are you asking like if you do drop to one video a day, what you could expect from a click-through rate perspective, or what you should program in that one video per day?
I know what I would program. I'm wondering if I already have the data. I did that experiment for 2 months and destroyed the channel because there were 2 videos a day that weren't getting any kind of views. But the premiere videos were getting views because I were promoting them heavily. It was the only ones I was showcasing. So would that give me the data to say, hey, if I look at like my top 10 rules is one of the ones that I premiered. So if I go back to that period in December or whatever it was, or November, and say, pull up 5 of my top 10s that I did a premiere on and look at the click-through rate, is that almost looking at what you're suggesting? Like, is that going to give me some data?
It could. I don't know how Premieres affects impressions and click-through rates, especially in browse. Is one of these ones that you did a premiere on?
Off the top of my head, I have no idea. It's not going to be the music stuff. It'll be a top 10. Is this when I was tanking hard?
This is November 26th.
Okay.
Similar. Now it's going up. Could be. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Generally speaking, I don't know how Premieres affects impressions and click-through rates and where Premieres shows up for people if they're on YouTube. Generally speaking, I would say like find a place where you have like clean recent data, right? Which basically means like you got to do it for a week and kind of see what happens. I guarantee you, assuming everything else stays the same, your click-through rate will go up on those videos, in no small part because you won't have other new content kind of stepping on it, right? So like if I'm a diehard Carmichael fan and I watch every, episode or, 1 out of every 5 videos that goes up, well, what happens is by having so many videos that are new and fresh, YouTube keeps recommending that to me. And so if I'm not interested in a particular series, those are just going to be empty impressions, right? Now, they move them out relatively quick, but with that volume, you're still going to get a much lower click-through rate versus if you had a lower volume, they're not going to get as many impressions, especially if it's like, 2 or 3 of your videos being recommended to this person at the same time.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Good stuff to think on.
Yeah, I know it's a big suggestion. I wish I had more stuff like, do this playlist strategy, do this end screen strategy, and it was simple. Unfortunately, it's just not that simple when you're talking about a channel of this size with this much content.
So if I look at me against Gary V, we're number 1 and 2 in this space. He's got 1.9 million subscribers. I have 1.8. We grow about the same a day on subscribers. He's probably a little bit ahead of me on subs growth, but I'll crush him on views. Like I'll double his views on a daily basis. And he's doing daily video. He's doing once a day.
Mm-hmm. So is that overall on viewership for the channel, or is that on new uploads?
I just look at Social Blade. It'd be me total versus him total, because a lot of my videos may not pop from the gate, but they pop over time. Like a lot of my videos, most of my videos will just go and then you see that spike and then they drop down and die. But a good chunk of them like a month later will still come back up. They'll resurrect themselves. So on a channel, on a daily, like his daily upload will probably beat mine. But the strength of the archive leads to way more views coming in on my channel than pretty much anybody in my industry. Like in my niche of entrepreneurship will pretty much crush everybody who's doing content, not on subs gained always, but on views for sure. So I'm not converting the views to subs, but I'm getting tons of views compared to what people are doing. And he's daily. Not everybody's daily, but he's daily.
You have him beat on library for sure, right? He doesn't have anywhere near the volume of videos that you have, right?
Sure. Well, that's anybody. Like I have most people being on library.
Yes, you do. Right. So like you have that viewership. You could be far outpacing Gary Vee from a viewership perspective if you uploaded less frequently. Okay. So he does pretty well from a new viewership perspective kind of in this space, right? What could end up happening is longer term, as he kind of builds up that library, right, places more bets on the table, basically, right? His library viewership begins to catch up on a per video basis as he builds that library, and his newer content is going to out-recommend your newer content because it probably has a higher click-through rate and is potentially getting, the same or better average view duration. Now, I don't want to sit here and give Gary Vee free advice on his YouTube channel, but each new upload you put up, and you put up one a day, we'll say his average is 50K, right? Did 50K. The strength of your library is going to drive massive viewership to those new videos, and those new videos are going to drive massive viewership to your library. Because right now, right, your library isn't driving viewership to your new videos at any substantial amount, right? And so what'll end up happening is if your newer videos are getting those higher click-through rates and you're maintaining that healthy average view duration, it's going to drive more and more viewership to those new videos, which means they become more likely to become strong library performers, right? Because right now, right, you might get 1 out of 10, videos become a strong library performer, but the volume you're doing is kind of creating that. If you can get 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 4 of your new videos to be a strong library performer, your average daily viewership is going to go way, way above Gary Vee's or other people's. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay.
Gary could get a much better click-through rate. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, cool. I think, did you have one other question in the email you sent over? I feel like maybe.
What my goal going in was also thinking, how do I be the best at resurfacing the old? Because I have such a big library, it's an advantage I have over everybody else. How do I be the best at resurfacing the old stuff? We're going to go back and change thumbnails and change titles. I don't know if you have any guidance or wisdom on being able to crush with the old videos resurfacing.
So in terms of resurfacing older content, redoing thumbnails can be really helpful, but your thumbnails are already pretty excellent. That said, what we're seeing is more and more viewership come through mobile. Now, this has been true for some time. It's not like revolutionary, but let's take a look at your viewership. So your mobile viewership is 60%. If you fire up the old smartphone and look at suggested videos on mobile, it's like the smallest thumbnail you'll ever see. And so from using text perspective, generally we're highly discouraging that right now because text is very, very difficult to read on mobile. I know generally speaking, like pretty much every single one of your thumbnails has text in it.
We've done a lot of testing on that, but we have been making the text bigger. I've never had a non-text video pop with a thumbnail. We've tried tons, but I'm open. Like maybe we just suck at making non-text. I have no idea. I've never been able to make a non-text one pop.
It's audience specific though, right?
Okay.
And your audience is very much a reading audience. So the getting rid of text on your thumbnails, generally speaking, I don't think is going to increase your particular audience's click-through rate. But I think what you mentioned is the way to go, right? Like very, very limited text, right? Very readable, I think you'll be all right in mobile. Again, I think your thumbnails aren't the problem from a click-through rate perspective, and neither are the titles, really.
The main metric I pay attention to is subscribers gained per series. That's what we really look for. Like, is this series gaining me subscribers or losing? I have 2 videos a day that gain me subscribers and 1 video a day that loses me some subscribers.
You know what I'm going to answer if you ask the question.
No, but I'm thinking if I go down the 1, like, what am I going to do? Which one do I take out? If you're saying go down the 1, I'm going to kill an entire series that's gaining me subscribers.
Well, you don't have to, though. Put it on another channel.
Right. So if you want me to have 3 channels, each with a video a day with different, you still believe, but slightly different value props.
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
Variety amounts of Evan. Right.
Yeah.
All right.
I know it's a tough one. I know it's like, hey, change everything about what you know about YouTube and what you're doing currently. But I promise you, I've seen it time and time again be massively successful. It helps the current channel, it helps the new channel, it helps the series that you put on those places. And like, yeah, it can be kind of a pain in the butt, right? But ultimately, it's short-term pain for a lot of long-term viewership gain. And also think about it this way, right? If you have a channel that features very little Evan, and the viewership on that is growing, in that particular instance, if the value prop isn't you or your time, you don't have to be in that video. You can hire someone else to host those videos, to edit those videos, right? And then you have an asset, theoretically, that's churning out income for you that you don't have to exert any time or energy into.
Yeah, I like putting in the work, man. I like
Well, what I'm saying is you can use that time more effectively, right? Start another new channel.
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing, the biggest hesitation is if anything changes, the strength of the library is the one of the biggest things I have. And if it goes back to, hey, we're going to recommend super specific content on keywords or search becomes the thing, then I've taken away from building up that asset, building up little assets instead of one giant one.
Somewhat. If you're still putting out the same volume of content, right, across different channels, and you're still doing it at the same frequency, you're still building up those assets basically at the same exact rate. You're just giving them a better chance of becoming library content that is going to perform even better longer term.
Right. Okay.
Dude, I know it's tough. It's really tough.
I like tough. Listen, I'm heading to the Grand Canyon on my helicopter ride over. I'm gonna be thinking about Matt Gielen and the future of my YouTube channel.
All right, cool, man. Well, thank you again very much for letting us take a look at your analytics. I think this stuff is, remarkably valuable for creators to be able to see other people's analytics. So thank you very much for being open and sharing it with our audience, man. I appreciate that.
I appreciate your time, man. And I was so pumped when you decided to make your own YouTube channel. I'm like, yes. We get more Matt knowledge and insight. I clicked the bell as soon as I saw that video. So appreciate you, man. I
appreciate it. All right. Well, have a wonderful time flying over the Grand Canyon in the helicopter, and I'll be paying attention to your channel. Let's not be strangers. I wanna see that growth explode.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you.
All right, brother. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, man.
So thank you guys so much for watching. I got nowhere to send you because this is the first video on the channel, but I appreciate your love and stay tuned. More content coming to you soon, starting tomorrow. Believe.